Hello, my name is Jumpy, and now we've reached the final movie I'll be discussing in this retrospective series, Saw 10. This one was written by the same duo that did the last two films, and Kevin Greutert returns as director. Going into this movie, I knew that it takes place between the first two films in the series, and that Tobin Bell and Shawnee Smith return. I knew nothing else about the story, which is a good thing. After I finished watching it, I looked at the plot synopsis, and it gives away too much. The movie uses the same spooky Lionsgate logo as Saws 2 through 7, and it returns to the 16:9 aspect ratio that the first 7 movies used. It opens with John Kramer at a chemotherapy session before he goes to a cancer support group. Here, we meet a man named Henry Kessler, who has pancreatic cancer. The next day, John meets with his doctor who tells him he may only have a few months left. On his way out, John sees a custodian attempting to steal a watch and ring from an unconscious patient. The patient's fingers on one hand appear to have been broken and are held in place by a device. This gives John an idea. Cut to the custodian strapped to a chair with tubes connected to his eyes, which is the image on the movie's poster. He also has his fingers in a device similar to the one that the hospital patient had, but this one serves a different purpose. He needs to turn a dial 5 times, once for each finger the device will break. He can't do it fast enough, and it gets messy, as a lot of these traps have a tendency to do. His eyes are sucked through the tubes one at a time. But this is just John's imagination. Back in the hospital, the custodian is going through the patient's wallet, and John makes his presence known. The custodian puts everything back and leaves. John tells him, "Good choice." I really love this moment because it gives some insight into how John picks who gets tested. 4 months later, John is looking over his will at an outdoor cafe when he sees Henry, who looks really well. They remember each other, and John asks how Henry got better. Henry found out about Finn Peterson, a Norwegian doctor who has an experimental treatment that combines surgery and drugs. This is the same doctor that John was talking about in Saw 6 during his meeting with William. Henry lifts up his shirt to show a scar on his stomach and gives John a website. John goes home and researches Dr. Peterson. He watches a video where the doctor mentions gene therapy. John then goes to the website Henry gave him and watches another video, this one with the doctor's daughter, Cecilia Peterson. She says her father was close to curing lots of illnesses, and pressure from governments and pharmaceutical companies caused him to go off the grid. Cecilia is conducting trials, and John sends a message that he wants in. Later, he gets a call from Cecilia telling him there's a trial in 3 months, but he doesn't have that much time. She says she's in Mexico for a trial that starts in a week, and they could add one more participant. John flies down to Mexico City and meets a tour driver named Diego. Outside the city, a van pulls in front of them, and masked and armed men pull John out of the car and ask for his name. He assures them he's John Kramer, and they immediately tell him he's safe and gently escort him into the back of the van. At this point, I had no idea where this movie was going. They arrive at a mansion, and a woman named Gabriella opens the door. She says that this is her home, and that Cecilia saved her life. Cecilia arrives and apologizes for the men, and says that not even John can know where they are. She shows him around. Outside there's a caretaker, and his son Carlos is kicking a soccer ball at the wall. In another building, which used to be a chemical factory, there's an operating room that looks like a glass rectangular prism. You can see inside because the walls are just all windows. Here we meet Mateo, an anesthesiologist, Valentina, a nurse, and Parker, who has thyroid cancer and underwent an operation the previous day. The next morning, John wakes up and hears something. He goes out and sees Carlos trying to fix his bike's wheel rim, so he helps the kid. Carlos doesn't speak English, and John doesn't speak Spanish, but he motions and finds out the Spanish word for pull, which is jalar, spelled Jallar. What John does here is puts the metal rim in a vise, and then pulls to try to straighten out the edges. He then puts it back on the bike along with the tire, and the kid's happy. In a series filled with horribly violent scenes like the end of Saw 8 where Logan pretends to die in the laser collar trap. But it turns out he was just pulling Detective Haller and leg, and then kills him, it's nice to see a wholesome moment. Then a neurosurgeon named Dr. Ramon Cortez performs the operation. This echoes the surgery scene in Saw 3, in which he needs to stay awake. During it, he looks over at the wall and briefly sees a reflection of a computer monitor that shows what's happening in his surgery before the nurse readjusts the screen. Afterwards, John wakes up in a room in a different location. Cecilia greets him and tells him that everything looks good, and that he needs to drink drug cocktails for the next week. John laments not saying goodbye to Gabriella or anyone else. There's a really good piano music-driven montage where John looks out into the world from his decks, drinks the drugs, and then sits on a park bench to sketch some blueprints for the Saw 3 rack trap. He stops to think and then tears the page out and throws it away. Holy shit, he's having second thoughts about doing it. Because this is a prequel, my brain kept trying to align what was happening in this movie with my knowledge of the other movies. So I knew John still has cancer in Saw 2, and that he doesn't have a scar on his head in Saw 3. I was fully expecting something to stop the surgery from happening, like a police raid. And then, when that didn't take place, I started thinking about what else would make sense. And I put it together just a few minutes before the movie itself revealed it, which was very satisfying. John buys a bottle of alcohol as a gift for Gabriella. Afterwards, he looks at a tower in the distance that was also visible from the mansion, and he uses it to triangulate the mansion's location and then goes there in a taxi. He finds the door left open and calls out to Gabriella. John walks over to the operating room and the place isn't looking good. Much of the equipment is missing, some of what's left is knocked over, and a mirror is broken. John notices a case for an educational surgery DVD. He plays it and skips to a part that looks very familiar. It's what he caught a glimpse of on the monitor during his surgery. He turns and looks at the broken mirror and rips the bandages off his head, which is reminiscent of when he rips the gunshot wound makeup off his head at the end of the first movie. Underneath the bandages, there's nothing. Cecilia and the rest of them conned him and didn't do a surgery. He's probably thinking, God damn it, I am not having good luck with people whose names start with Cecil. We're 34 minutes into the movie now, and the plot synopsis gives away that it was a scam and what happens next. As soon as I figured out that it was all fake, I knew the next logical step is that John will get revenge. And that was definitely something I wanted to see. At night, John kidnaps Diego from his taxi. Back at the abandoned factory, Diego wakes up tied up with pipe bombs on his arms that are held in place by cables that pierce the skin. John watches from behind a window, and Diego says that he's already given up the other people. A tape reveals that because Diego pretended to be Dr. Cortez, he must cut out the bombs before they detonate in order to survive. He starts digging into his arms. It gets messy, as a lot of these traps have a tendency to do. The sound effects here make it really rough. He makes it in time, and John brings the first aid kit and assures Diego he'll be alright. Afterwards, John calls a detective to help him find the other people responsible. We don't see or hear Hoffman, but this still brings a smile to my face. Next up, Valentina, the pretend nurse, is saved from being assaulted by a man in a car outside a club, and then kidnapped by someone in a pig mask. The following scene takes place in a veterinary clinic, and the first thing we see, it's a dog pit. Real dogs this time. Mateo, the fake anesthesiologist, works there, and he steals some drugs after his coworkers leave. Gabriella shows up, pays him for the drugs, and leaves. Someone in a pig mask knocks Mateo out, and then Gabriella is abducted from a bathroom. Cecilia is in a house on a phone, trying to scam someone else, giving the same speech she gave John, about how there's one extra spot in a trial. She grabs stacks of cash with her colleagues' names on them and puts them in a bag. She hears something and turns on the lights. We see a wide shot from outside that shows the house's exterior is just made up of a bunch of windows, and it's visually reminiscent of the fake operating room. She checks her security cameras and sees someone walking on the roof, which is a horrifying image, and thankfully it's done quietly without a musical sting. The person carries a rock and then slams it down, breaking the roof and causing glass to fall below. She runs to her car and gets in. Someone in a pig mask is in front of her, and someone else in a pig mask pops up in the back seat and stabs Cecilia in the neck with a syringe. They unmask themselves. The one in the back seat is John, and the other is Amanda. She walks over and says hi. I knew she was in this movie, and it's obvious it wasn't John doing all these kidnappings, but this is a fantastic reveal, and I'm so happy to see her again. Inside the factory, Gabriella, Matteo, and Cecilia are all chained up, and Valentina is in a trap. Amanda walks over and wakes up Cecilia, then grabs her phone and coat and puts them on a cart and rolls them in the middle of the room out of their reach. John walks out and talks to them. Matteo blames Cecilia, and Gabriella tells John she meant no harm. Valentina is sitting and has a sharp Geely saw around her neck. John opens a box with some things inside, telling her that using them is how she'll get out. He starts a machine, and Amanda pushes another button that pulls the saw wire towards Valentina's neck. John gives a great speech about how they exploited dying people's hope. He pulls out Cecilia's bank records, revealing that she's been doing this for 8 years and has scammed 34 people for over $8 million. Amanda says they're all dead, and the money is in the upstairs room that overlooks the area. I always like when John himself is there in person talking to the people in the traps, like Hoffman, Cecil, and Ryan and Anna. Here, he explains that Valentina has 3 minutes to cut off her leg and extract 3 ounces of bone marrow from her femur to escape. Cecilia tells John that this isn't right, and he tells her that she's not the one to talk about morality. Valentina almost makes it, but runs out of time and gets decapitated. Gabriella has an oxy addiction, and Amanda empathizes with her and knows how awful drug addiction can be. So she tries to talk John out of making Gabriella's test next. I love their scenes together throughout this movie, and it's awesome seeing Amanda's doubt here at an early stage of her being a Jigsaw accomplice. She thinks she isn't ready to take over, but he tells her that she is. Cecilia's phone rings, and she sees that John and Amanda aren't watching. Cecilia pulls Valentina's body towards her, cuts open Valentina's stomach with a nearby sharp piece of metal, and pulls out the intestines. Cecilia then throws the end to Matteo, who throws them to Gabriella, who tosses it back to Cecilia. Then, Cecilia uses this lasso to pull the cart towards her and retrieve the phone. I haven't seen such a clever usage of intestines since Ricky-O, The Story of Ricky, or Machete. Cecilia calls someone in Norwegian before Amanda uses a remote to shock Cecilia. John comes down, and Cecilia tells them that she was calling her father, who can help John. After they return to the command room, Amanda checks the monitors and sees someone outside, which is one of my favorite turns this movie takes. It's Parker, the guy who had thyroid cancer and thought he had an operation from the scammers. He has a gun and is demanding a refund. He gets inside, sees a figure in a pig mask, and then shoots it. The head falls off, and it's Valentina's. Amanda sneaks up and hits Parker in the head with a pipe. Parker wakes up tied to a chair in the command room. John wheels Parker over to a monitor so he can show him who's out there. Don't worry, the rest of Valentina's body is still there. Amanda just moved the head. John tells Parker that they have his money and that Cecilia needs to play her game first. John assures Amanda that everything will go according to plan. Amanda tells him that she's going to start Matteo's test now instead of Gabriella's, and then she walks out and sets it up. A door opens up, and Matteo is strapped to a chair with a device around his neck and behind his head. Billy the Puppet makes a cameo and rides out on a tricycle that's pulling a cart behind it. There's an absolutely wonderful shot from behind with the camera placed on the cart as the puppet pulls it up to Matteo. The cart has a tape recorder and medical tools. Matteo sees a monitor with a camera pointed at the top of his head, a spot of which has already been shaved. On the tape, John says that he needs to cut open the top of his head, remove a piece of his skull, and take out enough of his brain to dissolve in a liquid and get a key. Like Valentina, he comes close but runs out of time. The devices around Matteo's neck heat up and then close on his head. Afterwards, Amanda suggests to John that Cecilia's father can save him, but he says he's going to die and their work will continue after he does. They cry and hug each other. It's actually sweet. Amanda unties Parker. Gabriella plays her game. She has chains on one of her wrists and one of her ankles. She's pulled upwards and is positioned in front of a radiation machine. She needs to grab Briella a mallet and then use it to break her bones to get out of the shackles, like Eric did at the start of Saw 3. Gabriella starts with the ankle and then the wrist. After this double fracture presentation, she falls to the ground. Why the hell am I joking about this? I actually like Gabriella and understand her situation, and this is a sad scene. John tells Amanda to take Gabriella to a hospital, but Parker retrieves his gun and points it at them. He wants Cecilia's keys. He forces John and Amanda to walk down. Parker and Cecilia are lovers, and he was a part of the scam. Parker forces Amanda to free Cecilia and then has John put himself in Cecilia's place and then put the shackles around his own neck and ankles. John's connected to a device, and there's another set of shackles on the other end of it. Cecilia steps on Gabriella's neck because Gabriella wasn't broken enough already, and because killing her means Cecilia gets more money for herself. Parker makes Amanda put a shackle around her ankle. Suddenly they hear something outside. It's now after 6 a.m., and Cecilia knows what that sound is. It's Carlos kicking a soccer ball against the outside of the factory. Cecilia goes outside and convinces the kid to come inside with her. When he realizes something's wrong and tries to run, they put him in the other side of the trap. John pleads with her to let Carlos go and tells her this isn't right. And Cecilia throws his line from earlier back at him when he told her she wasn't the one to talk about morality. She forces them to start the game. The trap has a lever on each side. Pulling one of them starts the game, and John tells Carlos, "No jalar," which is don't pull in Spanish. Parker starts the game, and the chains pull both John and Carlos to the ground on the platform. It rises up, and blood starts pouring down from pipes on both of their faces. John pulls his lever, which causes the platform to tilt in his direction, and this stops the blood from falling on Carlos. Carlos sees what's happening and pulls the lever on his side to save John from drowning. John hates that the kid has to go through this and pulls the lever on his side and holds onto it so that Carlos can't tilt it back to his side. Cecilia and Parker go to the command room to get their money. When Cecilia grabs the bag, the room's door closes and locks automatically, and a 10-minute timer starts. The blood trap stops. The shackles have built-in releases, and John and Amanda free themselves. Amanda gets Carlos out of the trap, and John hugs Carlos and calls him a warrior. There's no money in the bag, and Cecilia tries to fire the gun at the locked door, but it doesn't have any bullets in it. In flashbacks, we see that Diego gave up Parker, and we finally hear Hoffman's voice over the phone as he tells John that he can't find Parker, and they'll need to do something else to get him there. Amanda left Cecilia's phone out so that she would call Parker. In the command room, poisonous gas starts seeping in. A hole that's big enough for a head to fit through opens up, and John on a tape tells them that only one of them can live and they'll have to fight each other for it. John's already working on fixing Lynn and Jeff's marriage. He cannot be bothered to do the same for Cecilia and Parker's relationship. They struggle, and Cecilia kills Parker and sticks her head through the hole to run out the timer. John grabs the real bag of cash and gives it to Carlos for getting him into this mess. John, Amanda, and Carlos walk to the door, open it, and walk out into the sunrise. It's such a satisfying ending. I like to think that right after this, Amanda tells them to hold on for a minute, and then runs back inside and returns with Valentina's head. John's expression asks, "What the heck is that?" And Amanda answers, "It's a souvenir for Hoffman." And then this later turns into the skull with the wires that we see in his lair at the end of Saw 5. But there's one more loose end, which is why there's a mid-credit scene. In the iconic bathroom, John and Hoffman have kidnapped Henry, the man who pretended to have cancer and told John about Cecilia. Henry's arms are in shackles, and he's wearing a device that has claws on it. Hoffman dramatically delivers a line about how unlucky Henry is to have conned the Jigsaw Killer, and John says he wants to play a game. Right? The bat. Hoffman starts the device, and its claws start to dig into Henry's stomach, where the fake red badge of courage scar near his pancreas was. The foreshadowing was there once again. Instead of having him say the words Red Badge of Courage, this time they gave him the same name as the book's main character. And that's Saw 10. I love this movie. I'll admit I originally wanted a continuation of the series that shows what happens with Hoffman and Gordon after Saw 7, as well as Logan after Saw 8, and William and Zeke after Saw 9. Hopefully we get all of those eventually, but I love seeing Tobin Bell, so I was still excited when I found out Saw 10 was a prequel. I think the movie has a well-written script with regards to its setups and payoffs. It's basically another Saw movie with 30 minutes of setup at the beginning, and I admire that it took its time to get going. It does feel a little like they threw in the fantasy scene of the custodian's test just because all the other movies start more quickly, and they didn't want anyone to get bored since there are no other traps until the 35-minute mark. But the scene works because it shows us some of John's thought process behind picking test subjects. And I really enjoyed seeing his doubts when he thought he was cured, and all of his interactions with Amanda, and more of her before she started fixing the game so people can't win them. Because Saw 10 is a prequel, I knew that John and Amanda were going to survive, and that most of the other people were going to die, but I still had no idea where the film was going at times. Parker and Carlos showing up at the factory were both very surprising. The movie is focused, without jumping back and forth to other characters at other locations. The traps aren't anything new at this point, and the factory might as well be a warehouse in the same city as the rest of the movies. But I'm cool with that. One last thing I really like is the movie's theme of hypocrisy, highlighted when John and Cecilia both ask each other, quote, "A lesson in moral decency? From you?" The adage, "those who live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones," is also shown visually, when Cecilia was staying in a literal glass house, and Amanda throws a rock through the roof. Saw 10 is my favorite movie in the series since the original trilogy. I'm giving it an 8 out of 10. And that wraps up these reviews. This has been a long journey. I love this series, and I've had a lot of fun revisiting the first 9 movies and watching the 10th one for the first time. I like Saw 7 and Saw 8 more now than in the past. Even Saw 5, which I think is the weakest entry, is still pretty good. On average, I've given these movies exactly a 7 out of 10. Throughout the video, I've been saying which movies I prefer over the others, but here are my overall rankings on screen right now. The series started off strong, but Saw 10 almost gets back up to the original quality for me. Obviously, I'm looking forward to Saw 11. And now that I'm finally done, I can go back to using the word saw as a past tense verb, instead of saying watched, viewed, have seen, etc. I didn't want to make that pun, even on accident. That joke is way too fucking obvious. And I'm saying this as someone who earlier said Hoffman is my main Hoffman. Thank you for sticking around until now. I really appreciate it. Take care, everyone.